Folks, no one can deny we have a climate crisis. You have all these environmental problems that are so profound, they're hard to deny. And people are seeing them now, along with extreme superstorms and droughts. That's why I took the most aggressive action ever in all of history in any country to take on the climate crisis.
President Biden earlier this week pushing a familiar narrative that Democrats are the only party who can save the world from impending environmental disaster, and Republicans, well, they can care less. Well, that's certainly not true. Does he have a point? Is the Republican Party and our conservatives surrendering the environment as an issue to the left when, in fact, their historical record on protecting the environment is arguably better than the other side? In his recent article for the California Globe, my next guest points out how conservation used to be a conservative issue, writing, quote, "The notion that progressives cherish the environment while conservatives care only about exploiting it for profit has taken hold of the American political dynamic so forcefully that it is hard to remember a time when it wasn't so." But it wasn't. The original conservationists were, as you might expect from the name, conservatives. And Ken Kerson is with us. He is the founder of Sia Reads Media, and he was the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Leadership with Rudy Giuliani, and he joins me now. Ken, good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Tom.
In your article, you reference a poll by the American Conservation Coalition, a group founded to provide a home for young conservative environmentalists. And according to the poll, voters are more likely to support candidates who advocated for immediate action on climate by a 2-to-1 ratio. Among voters under 30, the ratio is 4-to-1. Additionally, Democrats held an 11-point advantage over Republicans when respondents were asked which party do you trust more to address climate change. So Republicans, are they leaving votes on the table by not having a strong environmental message?
They're absolutely leaving votes on the table, and it doesn't have to be that way because large numbers of Republicans care about the environment, and they care about it just as passionately as Democrats. They don't define it the same way. They're much more concerned with clean air and clean water than they are with climate change. But Republican solutions for the environment have worked. They've been advocated by giant majorities. You know, Representative John Curtis of Utah started his conservation caucus, and it has 75 members now.
Yeah.
The Pew survey found that large majorities of Republicans favor solutions such as planting 1 trillion trees around the world, providing tax credits to encourage clean technologies, and are really focused on solving this problem that really nobody can deny.
Republicans have a very long and storied history of being very pro-human health and the environment. We've got a list that we can show folks. In fact, most of the major environmental legislation in this country, or environmental action over the last century, has happened under Republican administrations. Theodore Roosevelt created the National Park System. Richard Nixon, the EPA was created under him. The Clean Water Act, coastal management. Gerald Ford established the CAFE standards for cars. The nuclear waste policy under Ronald Reagan. The Clean Air Act amendments happened under a Republican administration. So why do you think that conservatives are concerned about this issue? Do you think that it's about the fact that they're tying themselves to eco-cultism or alarmism that's not necessarily grounded in science?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The left has done a masterful job in sort of attaching this idea that the only way to prove you're pro-environment is to shiver in the dark. And miraculously, they've done it while taking private planes to Davos and lecturing the rest of us. It's a really strange messaging phenomenon. You know, I know you from our shared political background, and this kind of messaging win is very rare to achieve, and the left has done so. They've taken an issue that Republican households care about passionately, and they've turned it into a Democrat issue with no evidence of success, with no record of success. That list that you just showed of Republican success could have gone on and on, including the critical amendments in 1990 under the first President Bush. Second President Bush was not bad on the environment, and President Trump, by advocating for American sources of energy, was actually incredibly helpful to the goals of the environment, even if he didn't talk about it in ways ways that the current woke fundamentalists would approve of.
I think that so much of it also has to do with just a change in the amount of investment, in the tone and the tenor of the environmental lobby, which is basically just a wing of the Democratic Party. I mean, I remember when I was at the EPA during the George W. Bush administration, he wanted to cut NOx, SOx, and mercury. So those are 3 of the 4, kind of greenhouse gases. In a way, 70% reductions in those. It would have been historic. And I sat in the room with these eco groups. They're very, very plain that they didn't want to advance that just purely for political reasons. And so I think we also have this kind of change in tone and tenor where it's been co-opted by, really by the far left, and Republicans don't think that they can compete with it. Ken, what's a message for conservatives that walks the right balance that you think could be effective in the 2024 cycle?
Well, I think conservatives can come out and be proud to advocate for clean air and clean water. And they don't have to make the entire global climate change argument, which is impossible to see, impossible to get your arms around the science, even for people who believe in it, like myself. But I think if you advocate for lower carbon emissions, technological solutions to carbon emissions, and clean air and clean water in your neighborhood, you're helping the environment more than any of these giant policy goals, which will shut the world down, ever could.